Caroline.
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions actually, because I work for two parish councils. So the first one is, how many Suffolk councils are signed up already? I mean, on your picture there, I counted 12. Is that correct?
Those are the campaigns we've got.
Right.
I don't think I'm not sure how many parish
You
councils
know
are
how many, perhaps across the country, are involved? How many parish councils?
across the country.
Hmm.
We do know, Caroline, actually, at the moment. Well, I mean, it's always, people need to let us know. And I think this is probably a conservative estimate, actually, because I do know of councils who are discussing at the moment the motion. But the ones who have let us know, we have 20 at the moment.
20 in Suffolk.
Who have in Suffolk who have passed the motion. Yeah.
Okay, that's great. So the other question was Baddingham. Baddingham's got a stretch called the Low Road, which is quite intense with housing. And then there's sort of a stretch that goes up a hill that there's not really any houses on, and then there's houses past that. At the meeting last night, one of the councillors said, if we go for 20s plenty across the whole of Baddingham, that stretch where there aren't really any houses as yet, could be designated as residential area because it's a 20-mile-per-hour zone. Is that correct? Or can you pick and choose your zones in a village, in other words? Because Baddingham, for instance, wouldn't want it in the entire village. They'd want it in the lower part and then in the upper part, but not in the part in between.
So I don't know Baddingham, so I can't comment on it. But what's really important is to get the transition points right. And that might mean that you need to have two zones. You might do. I don't know. You certainly can do that.
Okay.
I would encourage you to have it as wide as possible, just because you're more likely to get overall compliance. But clearly, I mean, the thing to do in all these cases is you need to get somebody to design you a scheme, so you know where the entry and exit points are and any exceptions. So, for example, I'm just helping Chichester and West Sussex at the moment. They've got quite a lot of 20 miles an hour, and they want to expand it to the whole city. But we know there are a couple of roads which will not go to 20; they will stay at 30. Okay. So that's the sort of the process which each place needs to go through, saying so where the transition points are on the outside, and then are there any exceptions within the middle?
Yeah, I understand that. But have you heard of a 20-mile-per-hour zone then being designated as, planning applications can then be put on it for housing? Have you heard of that happening? That's essentially the question.
Sorry, I don't understand the.
So there's Baddingham's got a gap where there's no houses in the village. Right. It's got a low part and a high part, and sort of a gap where there's no houses, but it's still Baddingham, and there's still little windy lanes.
Right.
One of the parish councillors heard that if you go for the whole of Baddingham as a 20-mile-per-hour zone, that bit between the low section and the high section could then effectively, people could put planning permission in because it is a 20-mile-per-hour zone and therefore deemed suitable as residential.
No. It's the planning process and 20 miles an hour are completely independent.
Okay.
There's sorry, I've understood the question now.
Yeah.
No,
okay.
There's no connection at all.
Okay. Thank you.
Can I ask how you see the campaign actually working? How do you see the influencing process work? Because we can all pass motions, but as you've mentioned, Suffolk has some pretty obstructive criteria in place for for a 20-mile-an-hour zone. So how do you see the communications and influencing process work to make them change the way they're doing things?
So what I've seen elsewhere is that once the county realizes that there is a combined effort, a combined view from lots and lots of places, then very quickly the policy changes. So I can just give you the example of what happened in West Sussex, where they were the previous portfolio holder was against 20 miles an hour, but he was getting lots of inquiries from all around the county, from the east of the county, from the west, north, and south, and that was a sort of campaign. We were campaigning on a county basis, when when he changed, the new portfolio holder said, I can see what's happening here. There's lots of pressure. We are going to have to change our policy in order to enable 20 miles an hour to happen. And that's, you know, so it is, if each person approaches the county individually, then you can easily be fobbed off. We've got something happening in Devon, where the Devon County Council sort of said, yes, we like 20 miles an hour, but we're going to limit it, we're going to ration it to 5 or 6 places a year, which means that it's going to take them 50 years to get 20 miles an hour across the county. So what we're doing in Devon now is we're having a county-wide campaign. All the parishes are writing to the county council and saying, no, you need to change your policy to enable 20 miles an hour to happen. I think if you join forces, then it's going to happen quicker than if you act individually.
So you are talking about multiple communications from each one of the relevant councils, but in a coordinated fashion. Right?
Yes.
Okay.
So can I ask a couple of questions?
Yes, Pauline.
Going back to the people in Alton, I mean, what we know about signage, about, you know, recommended speeds, is that all of that needs funding. We're waiting for some re-signing, and it's an issue about funding. So I assume that in Alton, you must have had highways or some county councils sign up to pay for the additional road signage and the change to the road signage. Is something that we're inevitably going to need to get addressed in funding terms, because none of our parish councils have that kind of money. It's fine to kind of have the big idea, but if you're going to make moves like this, you need to know where the money's coming from. So question number one was, in Alton, was the money coming from the local authority or somewhere else for you to put up the roundels for the 2020's plenty?
Okay, I'll just clarify, because as Gareth said, we are in a 20 mile an hour zone, so we weren't changing. We were in a campaign to prevent us going up to 30. We actually already had the roundels, although they are very worn away. So what we needed to buy were the additional signs, which were the 20 plenty bin stickers, which we created into signs for ourselves. So we're in a little bit of a different situation for that, but Gareth's got a...
Can I just add that our county councillor, though, was prepared to pay, in fact, 2 of them were prepared to pay to return it to 30, which meant the replacement of the 20 signs, and also, you know, the wiping out of the present roundels on the road. Right. So, you know, when they say there isn't enough money, if their ideas count, then suddenly that money appears. Okay.
So then the question back to Adrian, because if we're all starting from the place that we've got to get agreement about it and get, you know, it as local campaigns, people to say it's a good idea. What of the local authorities that have actually implemented it? Where is there a general pattern about where the money's been drawn from?
For those, I would say generally the local authority, the highways authority, finds the money. Right. And that's a general rule. I'll just give you 1 or 2 exceptions. And the reason for that is that once they've adopted 20 miles an hour, should we say embraced 20 miles an hour as the right speed limit, that then makes it much cheaper than having to go through each road and each place separately to work out which street should change and which street should stay and so on. It becomes a much cheaper process. Just as a rule of thumb, it's probably between £5 and £10 per person for each community. If you've got a very small community, it might be a bit more than that, because there's a certain fixed cost to doing it. But those fixed costs can also be spread as well. If say 2 or 3 neighbouring villages or parishes get together and say, we want it in all of our villages, then you're sharing the traffic regulation order cost. And that's often very significant. So that might be about £3,000 or £4,000. Obviously, if that's for 5 people, that's a lot of money. If it's for 5,000 for people, it's for 5,000 people. It's much less.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
that's that. And just to say, so for example, Cornwall has allocated 3.8 million for, I think, 700,000 people in Cornwall. Oxfordshire's allocated 8 million for about 700,000 people. So those are sorts of order of magnitude. West Sussex has not allocated any funding. What they've said is that we will change the policy to make it much cheaper and easier to get 20 miles an hour. We'll work out the funding later on. And I suspect what's going to happen is that they'll get so much demand that they'll find a pot of money somewhere.
Okay, so if people don't mind me just continuing with my strand of thinking, I chair a local action group called SAVID, which people in Westerfield might know of because you're have sort of signed up to it. But it stands for Safer Village Driving, and for the last 9 years, we've been working as a body to address concerns that most of our villages have about excessive speeds and what to do to raise awareness, to kind of educate people, to operate speed watch, to do also. But through this body, we've actually been able to kind of collectively manage various things together, one of which has been we've had a push to get speed indicator devices so we can actually do a measure of the speeds and the volume of traffic coming through our communities. It's an expensive way to do it, and if you can get a gadget for £60 and that's what you wanted to do, that might be a good idea for the villages that don't have it. But if we think about our, Suffolk as a county, there are the district council kind of groups, which, although they don't constitute highways, because highways is a county council, through the district council bodies and some of the partnership working, that is a forum that we could be using. And certainly there's one in East Suffolk covering our patch and Woodbridge, and I think it stretches down to Hoseley and so on. And there's a road safety body there, which would probably be a place to take a coordinated approach. So, it can feel a bit daunting if you're taking the point that was coming from Palgrave. How do we start on this, and how do we move it forward so we don't we're not kind of carrying it on our own. We've obviously got to do some education and influencing in our communities to get people to sort of sign up to it, but it's then how do we take it forward, so particularly if Suffolk is not geared itself up in terms of its policies to be receptive to much more than 20's plenty in a school area. Anyway, that's my contribution at the moment.
That's really helpful, and I guess that Janet and Gareth probably can comment on that. And just to go back to what Rupert was saying about earlier, I mean, the other thing too is if your parish council is supportive, if you can talk to your local parish councils as well and get together to if you may want to put a combined letter in or whatever. Janet, did you just want to add to Pauline's point?
Yes, yeah, thank you. And thank you for that, Pauline. That's really great, because I think we did notice your group. I'm not quite sure. I think it was one of your parishes got in touch with us actually and said
it was, yeah.
That's right, we're part of your group, and I had a look at that, and that was really, really interesting, and you've been really influential, I think, in being able to move things forward, particularly using your data and things like that. It's really, really good. And I think that is a really good thing for other people maybe to look at. So maybe we could put your email, your website sort of details when we send out the details after this meeting. Would that be all right? So other people
I'm sure it would be fine. I mean, we haven't had 20's plenty on our agenda. We did note it at our last meeting, but we were having a sort of workshop on how we gather data and how we use data to kind of decide when we might, how we might influence the police and enforcement and that side of things. But it will be on our agenda for our next meeting at the beginning of September.
Okay, that's brilliant. I think it's just even useful for people to be able to see. I find it very useful. to be able to see what you were up to. So it's really good. It made us realise what's out there. I was just going to add, though, actually, to the point around getting in touch with other people. Karen, myself, Gareth, and a couple of other volunteers, we have actually emailed the briefing paper and the invitation and the motion that you all got to every parish in Suffolk. Now, we do need to hit Ipswich. We haven't done Ipswich because we need to go through the town councillors, and we didn't know whether any of those were changing, so we will be getting to them as well. We will be going to district councillors, and we will be going, to county councillors, and maybe, and I'm sure Adrian will run another webinar for that council level too. So for those of you thinking about where next and asking people in your neighbouring communities, they should have had an email, certainly if they're out there in any of those areas, East Suffolk, Mid Suffolk, Bayborough and West Suffolk. We know we've got some big towns really interested, Woodbridge and Newmarket in particular. Newmarket are very, they were on the call last time, they were really interested and very keen to help and to support. So there are some big places as well who are starting to move. It isn't all about small communities. So you can also feel actually there are bigger places who are here at our back. Of course, we're on the edge of a town, I know, in Alton, but we do feel a bit villagey still. So we do understand what it's like. But certainly people next door to you in other communities, they will know, they should know about this. The clerks all did have that message. Okay, thanks, Adrian.
Thanks. So I've got Jethro and then Caroline.
Thanks, Adrian. First, I should say thank you for organising all of this. I'll send the link and I popped in because I'm very interested. Also, I need to go and put my youngest one to bed, which is a bit annoying because there's lots of interesting debate here. My one question is, do we know what places like Ockhold, which is a Suffolk village, which does have 20-mile-an-hour limit in their village, what they've done that was successful?
I don't, and I don't know whether Janet or Karen or Gareth do. But if not, that'd be a good thing to follow up on, actually.
I can tell you that, actually. I can tell you that, so because I was clerk for Ockhold. So Ockhold was part of a trial. I think there were 2 villages at the time, and Ockhold was one of them. It was part of a trial over 10 years ago. That's how they got the 20 miles per hour. It's got nothing to do with what we're talking about at the moment. It's a 10 or more years ago that it was part of a trial.
And it wasn't to do with having a school and 20's plenty for school. It was a
no, it was a trial. It was a complete trial basis.
Right.
Yeah. But my question is back to funding, because we know how.
Bye. Sorry.
Good night. Bye. Yeah. My question's back to funding, because we know Suffolk Highways haven't got any money. Obviously, Kia are losing the contract, and it's going to this new company in October. But we have something as simple as a pedestrian sign that we want to put up. We've had it costed back here because we've delayed our decision. A cost of £500 odd we have to pay for ourselves. Suffolk Highways won't even pay for that. So I don't quite understand where Suffolk Highways are going to find the money to pay for these signs. Essentially, that's what I'm worried about, because Suffolk Highways are the bane of most clerks' life. I'm sure most clerks will agree with that, and they've just got no money. So, where is the magic money tree going to come from?
I've heard the same story, Caroline, from many local authorities, all the way up and down the country, and then at some point somebody gets convinced that actually 20 miles an hour is a good thing, and suddenly they allocate the money to it. And I think the reason is that in terms of what's been happening on road safety traditionally is a sort of cluster site analysis. So you need, so they say, look, we've got X £1,000 or X £1 million, whatever it is, to deal with our road safety budget, and therefore we're going to prioritise a few cluster sites, and it'll be the 1 or 2 or 3 that get all that money. Increasingly, local authorities are realising that doesn't work, because each time you do one cluster site, the next cluster site costs you more per casualty. And they're starting to think they actually need a more generic approach, i.e. reductions in speeds across the face. So if you get the change in policy, I'm pretty confident that at some point the funding will follow it. If you think how much a roundabout costs, it's tens of millions of pounds, and those are funded from time to time. I know that in Faversham, for example, the funding came out of Active Travel Fund for that. In other places, there's sustainability money. So there are various pots of money that councils can bid for once they've got the policy in place to actually support this.
Okay, thank you.
Could I ask a question about the police?
Yes.
Because you're presenting, in the information you're presenting, it's quite a powerful figure in terms of casualty reduction and the extent to which the police are caught up in that, let alone what happens to individuals who are, suffering, getting involved in the casualties. Have any, what is there anything that suggests that the police have got any? I mean, because they have money. Are they backing it? Have any of the authorities that have gone down that road got anything to share about the police's concern? I mean, increasingly, county councils and highways are left to manage road safety. That's what Suffolk's carrying, and the police sort of step in and do, bits and pieces. But I'm just interested to know about, in terms of campaigning and the police's role, how they have responded, if at all, on an area by area, perhaps.
It's very variable, Pauline. I can tell you that in Avon and Somerset, police very hot on it. They've issued tens of thousands of notice of intended prosecutions in 20-mile-an-hour places. The Met is really supportive of what TfL is doing. West Midlands have been pretty good from time to time. In other places, police in Devon and Cornwall, the Devon and Cornwall police are supporting Cornwall in that. Alison Hernandez was the police and crime commissioner, is very supportive down there. In other counties, they are not so supportive, and it just varies depending on the police force. What I can say is that speed limits are the responsibility of the Highways Authority, and the Highways Authority need to decide what they think is appropriate for their place. Police are there to enforce speed limits to the extent that they think that there's a problem, and they will prioritise where they've got the biggest issues. Sometimes, so in other words, if they're seeing lots of casualties in one place, irrespective of what the speed limit is, they will come and look and see whether doing some speed enforcement will help. Luckily, of course, in 20-mile-an-hour places, you tend to get few casualties, so you don't get much enforcement, almost by definition, because it's a lower, it's a smaller problem. And my impression of Suffolk is that they're not over supportive of lowering the speed limits, but that's just something which we need to get across to them.
Thank you. Thanks.
Michael.
Yeah, just really to add to that, in Westerfield here, in the last few years, we've approached highways on numerous occasions, have ongoing dialogue, but it tends to be few and far between meetings. But when we've inquired about 20-mile-an-hour changes to roads, one of the highway's biggest arguments or excuses for dismissing it is simply that it's not enforceable. Have you got an experience of that or other? So
I'll just be a little bit pedantic, if you don't mind, Michael. It is absolutely not enforceable. If the traffic regulation order is set at 20 rather than 30, it is enforceable. Whether the police have the resources to enforce is a separate matter. As I said, they will prioritise those places which they see the biggest speeding problems and the biggest number of casualties.
Yeah.
So once you have, if the traffic regulation order has been implemented by the county council on a particular street, it is therefore by definition it is enforceable. So it really comes down to what the priorities of the Police and Crime Commissioner and the Chief Constable are.
Okay, thank you.
Does that answer?
Yeah.
I think following that up, if I may, Michael and John, I think it shows that the evidence that Adrian has presented in his presentation, and the document and all the information that's gone out on to all the parish councils, that's probably the influencing model we need to use, because there's evidence there of what can make the difference. And other highways will always come up with something that says, I've heard the issue about, it's not enforceable, and as Adrian said, it is to do with resources. So I think if we're to take this forward, it is about sort of collectively, and I'm perfectly happy to sort of make sure that if Westerfield's part of SAVID, that we have the 20s plenty issue on our agenda, and people come and we sort of talk about how we're going to do the influencing, and both locally and as a body. It's very easy to be put off by what we know historically is a problem in Suffolk. I'm not minimizing it. We have exactly the same issue over different things ourselves.
And every place we have worked in starts out resisting. And then eventually there's some sort of compromise, and then after a time, 20 miles an hour gets adopted. It really will happen in Suffolk. I just can't say when. It really depends on how much effort is put into the campaign. But it will happen here, like it's happening in all sorts of places over the country.
Where are you, Adrian? I realise I don't.
Oh, sorry, I'm in Tunbridge Wells. I'm in Kent.
Okay, thank you.
And again, the same thing in Kent. It was absolutely against 20 miles an hour, but we've now got it in all of Tunbridge, all of Faversham, quite a lot of Canterbury, quite a lot of Tunbridge Wells, bits of Sevenoaks. I mean, it is just happening here as well. So it's happening. It's a slightly different process here, but the county is now embracing it. It's doing it in a quiet way, town by town.
Just Adrian, I can't remember whether it was yourself or I think Janet Alton might have mentioned it, that the email went out to every parish within Suffolk, and probably the towns, I think you said, possibly other than Ipswich. Brain freeze. Does anybody just know roughly how many parishes or emails that was sent out? Because there's only about 10 of us here this evening who've attended, which seems quite a small number. So we're going to need to spread the word via other means. I attend a couple of times a year or so Sulk forums, which will probably be a good way of spreading the word as well. But if there's only about 20 parishes signed up, does anybody know how many roughly hundreds of parishes there are?
There's 436 parishes.
Sorry?
There's 436 parishes in Suffolk.
Thank you.
We know that there are some parishes who are just signing. They didn't think they needed to come to a webinar about it. We know that there are some parishes who don't always meet every month. So there is a little bit of a lag as well related to when they're coming to discuss it. And the other webinar that we had, Adrian, how many did we have last week? Can you remember?
I knew you were going to ask me that. I'm just going to look it up. We had well over 20 at that one. So, and we're prepared. I'm speaking for Adrian here, but we're prepared to keep having
I'm sure, a webinar, an information webinar for people who are not quite at the stage of having been able to discuss this as yet, or, you know, started to move on it. But equally, as I say, we've got some places that have just gone, yeah, let's do it. And they haven't thought to come.
I forgot to mention, of that 436, of course, some haven't got parish councils. They've only got parish meetings, which meet irregularly. So, you know, you only need to hold a parish meeting once a year, as you perhaps all know.
We had about 50 registered for the previous webinar.
Okay, thank you. That, I mean, it sounds a bit more. There's, you know, more support, engagement, and than appears just from this evening. So thank you.
Yeah, there is.
And these things take time, Michael. Just, you know, we're at the very beginning of this campaign, so we just need to, you know, get a bit of momentum.
Good.
Can I
Thank
ask? Sorry.
Rupert,
Can I just ask, who are we thinking of when we're trying to influence Suffolk? Who are we trying to influence? Because there's Suffolk Highways, who we deal with, and as Caroline says, you know, with a certain level of frustration. But the votes are carried out by the county councillors. And in fact, I just was looking up online, a motion to do this was rejected in 2020. You know, one political segment proposed it, and I presume the Conservative majority rejected it. So that suggests to me that it is the councillors that we need to be influencing, because it's not a decision that's made at Highways level; it's made by the councillors, and they need to vote differently this time around. So just was wondering what your experience was in terms of who you were targeting on the council.
So that's right. It is the councillors. So it is a policy decision. It's their policy, their decision. In some places they are acting on the advice of officers who are either for or against 20. But generally, as a general rule, officers are more in favour of 20 than councillors. So it's normally cracking the councillor piece, which is important. Having said that, in other places there might be councillors who are quite in favour, and it's the officers holding the thing back. So it does vary from place to place. But I definitely, the cabinet member with responsibility for transport, he or she is the key person, and if they can be persuaded to change their mind, then the whole thing will change. But there are probably other people, but there will be people who he or she is listening to, who it's important to influence as well. And I don't know what the informal influencing network is like in Suffolk.
Can I just say, with regard to that particular motion, I watched the debate online, because, as you know, all Suffolk County Council full meetings are online. Firstly, it was an amendment made by the Green councillors to the budget, and their argument was for a trial, to fund a trial. I think it was in 6 places, which was about £1 million to do so. I think it was their figures were that it would cost 14 pence each on the council tax to do that. Perhaps inevitably, the Conservative majority voted that down with the usual sort of arguments about well, it included things like it wasn't enforceable. You know, all the opposition wanted to do was to increase council tax and all that sort of stuff. And the Labour group abstained.
Right. Thanks very much for that insight.
So we have had certainly one of our campaign meetings, one of the Green councillors who actually put that forward. So there will be in your areas, depending on who your district councillors are now, and I know certainly mid-Suffolk, it's changed quite a lot, hasn't it, related to district council, and also for county councillors. There are councillors there who are in favour. So it is worth yourselves, if you want to move forward on that, sort of going forward and talking with them, because they will know that that motion about the budget was actually this year. It was in 2023. It was the budget that actually was passed in April. The Greens tried to bring it again. They can't bring another motion for a year anyway. So there is time to build the campaign. And I think that's also quite important. As Adrian said, you know, we've got a big county here. There are, I added it up today, 700 and something thousand people, you know. If we can start to demonstrate that a lot of those people live in areas where they would really like 20 miles an hour, and we can look at it that way, numbers of people, not just numbers of places, as another sort of measure, then we begin to build that pressure. So I think it's about finding ways to build that pressure in different ways. There was another question. I know, Caroline, actually, it came, I think, from your area, and I didn't know whether you wanted to ask the legality question, or do you want me to ask it, or has that gone away?
No, I had an answer from Suffolk, and Suffolk basically said,
okay, and
they basically said, yeah, it's totally legal to support a campaign like this because the parish councils act on behalf of the community, and if that's what the community wants, that's what they should be doing.
Thank
you.
Perfectly
legal.
Good for Salk, and well done for clarifying that, Pal.
Yeah, and as I said to you, I think on a message, it's really good to know that as well, because we could get asked that question by other people. So thanks for that, Caroline. Thank you for getting an answer from them.
You are unique, Caroline, because I've never had that question before, so I'm delighted to have had the answer.
I think we were rather horrified in Palgrave when the question came up, to be perfectly honest. I can say that because the chair is not present.
Very good.
Can I ask something, if that's okay?
Right. Please do.
So this is on our parish council's agenda for Tuesday. The whole of the village are very, very for this 20 mile an hour. We've had a head-on collision only last week in a 30 mile an hour zone. It's regularly used as a racetrack. That's about the third very serious accident we've had. So how do we, as a parish council, from the beginning, go forward? Do we contact our councillors? Do we purchase a gadget and sort of, you know, we've done all the speed watch things, and it came out that it was a very, very, very high speeding area.
So the things I would do, and this applies to anybody really, is first of all, you can set up a campaign, a 20 is plenty for Raiden campaign, right. And I can help you start that. And there's very little involved in that. It just basically gives you a pin in the map and an email address that people can. So it just sort of gives you a focus. You can purchase resources. So there's posters and banners and all sorts of stuff to highlight that people want 20 miles an hour in Raiden. So whenever your county councillor drives through or is walking through or whatever, they will see posters and banners and so on. Oh, this clearly is needed. So just making that publicity. Do all sorts of things, you know, photo shoots, get the press involved. There's tons of stuff you can do like that. Adopting the resolution would really help. And writing to Suffolk County Council saying we want 20 miles an hour in our place, and we want you to critically, we want you to change the policy to make it easier. And yes, and that's really the process. Make sure you include your county councillor in that, because ultimately
he's quite supportive, actually.
Okay, great. Well, ultimately, he or she would be the person who would be voting on this. You know, if it comes to full council, or if it comes to a select committee or something, you know, then they may well be voting on it. So it's important your county councillor is either supportive or is aware of the pressure in the village.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay. Any other questions from anybody? A couple of you haven't spoken. Has it been helped? Is it what you expected? Can we answer any questions or do anything more?
I've found it very useful because, as Michael's alluded to, it's very common for speeding in the village. We need to set up a campaign, or at least get it signed off by the council.
Yeah.
It's been very informative. This has given us a start of a 10.
Okay, great. I cover. I don't know how many counties I cover, but I cover a lot of counties. So I'm very happy to help. But it needs to come from the communities in Suffolk. You need to sort of lead on this. And I know that Janet and Gareth and Karen are working really hard. I will support you as much as you need. I'm here to help. I just can't lead it.
Yes, that's right. Thanks, Adrian. And we do want to thank you. Everybody wants to thank you, I'm sure, for, you know, the work you've put in. I think, as somebody else mentioned, I think it was Pauline, you know, the slides that are there on and the slides will be available for everybody. Everybody who's participated, we will make sure you have access to a copy of the slide and a link to the recording, relevant recording for you. We'll pop you the motion back out and the briefing papers as well, because I know some people actually were not necessarily the clerks who have come along. So there'll be a little pack of stuff coming through to you as well. Just a point about media. We are having a campaign meeting, I think, in the next couple of weeks, aren't we, Adrian?
Yes.
Sort of the 2020 for Suffolk. People are really, it is a collaborative effort. So if you are having a campaign in your area, you're very welcome to come along to those. They're on Zoom. So, you know, you just need to get the link. So either email, what shall I do? I mean, if I email you with the participant information, then you'll have my email. So you could email me if you want to come along. We'll make sure that you get the link to that meeting as well. Because this is
we have a county email address as well.
We have a county email address, of course. That's right.
So which is
have we got that in there? Have we got that in the chat?
I'll just do it. If you carry on, I'll write it in the chat.
Before I forget, coming back to what Lorraine said, if you're starting your campaign, you should also be aware that Road Safety Week, which is run by Break, the charity, they have a different focus every year. It's in November, and its focus this year is on speed. So if you go to the Break website, you can sign up for their action pack ready for Road Safety Week, which I think is the 17th week of the 17th of November, if I remember off my head, but it's in November anyway.
Yeah, that's really helpful. I was going to raise the question about Break. We supported their activity last year by doing a sort of coordinated speed watch activity. So I think that's worthwhile using as an opportunity to highlight the 20's plenty as well. I can see that. Thank you.
And the other thing just to say is the East Anglian Daily Times, it does depend where you are in Suffolk, doesn't it, as to which of the, we get the EDP up here on this northern border. But the East Anglian Daily Times is really supportive, actually. They were very interested in the motion that went forward into the budget with the county council. And they actually approached the Green councillors and said, you know, how interested they were. So I'm sure that they won't have forgotten that, and they will be interested in stories. And as a 20's Plenty campaign, when we, as I think it was Michael, you know, when we have enough body of people to be able to say, this looks like a press release here, you know, we have this number of people who have signed up the motion. So do keep telling us if you do it, and if your neighbouring parishes do it, make sure 20's Plenty for Suffolk know, because we've got a map, interactive map that we document, and a spreadsheet that we're documenting it all on. Then it means that we can start to go to the press. We can start to go with this body is building. That's the data that they want to hear. So we will do that, but we need the, you know, foundation to be coming along.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.